Welcome to School Life Unpacked, the podcast for anyone navigating the complexities of their child's education. Join me, Natasha Curtis-Ego, and a lineup of insightful guests as we explore the challenges, joys, and surprises of school life, offering support and tips to help us feel more confident and connected. Today, I'm really excited. We have a wonderful guest with us who's going to discuss with us everything about supporting your children through the early years. If you'd like to take a moment to introduce yourself, that would be amazing.
Hello, my name's Natalie Toms. I have worked in education for over 20 years. I first started out nannying in Finland for a month and then took a nursing degree and then eventually went on to teaching. And for the last 13 years, I've been in early years because that's now my passion and probably the only year group I'll ever work in again. And then this September, I joined Southend Council as part of the early years and childcare team as an improvement teacher. And that means that we are in an advisory role to support with nurseries, preschools, reception classes. And it means that we look at our settings adhering to the EYFS. We can help practitioners empower them with understanding the most current and up-to-date practices. We can support improvements. And we run an awful lot of training now that is free. And another addition to my role, as well as being an improvement teacher, is to focus on early identification. So looking at being able to support not those more complex special needs, but those low and emerging needs, being able to support in getting early identification and early intervention so that hopefully they don't then escalate to need more complex roles.
What would those needs be?
Mainly behaviour at the moment. That seems to be quite prominent. So I go in and either lead training on supporting with behaviour, or I very often will go into a setting and advise the setting as opposed to focusing on specific children. But I go in and look at how they're managing behaviours, their routines, and try and offer advice to support with sometimes challenging behaviour.
It sounds like a really rewarding role because I'm assuming, rightly or wrongly, but that every school or early years setting you go into is different. So you never know what you're going to get.
Absolutely. Yes. Everyone has different ways that they do their routines, and everyone has different levels of staffing. And then obviously unpicking sort of their behaviour policy and looking what they have, whether they are more behaviourist or relational practices, and also just looking at the experience of the staff and what they've dealt with possibly in the past to understand behaviour and thinking up to date with more current strategies. As we know, we're more aware now of the brain, we're more aware of early childhood trauma. So some of the strategies that we may have used in the past, and I have certainly used in my career, have now changed, and we've moved forward since then.
With early years setting, we're talking nurseries, childminding. Would that be covered?
And we do have our own childminding team. I am available to support the childminders, but we're very lucky here that we have two lovely colleagues that run and head up the childminding team. Okay. But the childminders also have access to early intervention and kind of my support and advisory role should they request it.
Okay, so your nurseries and preschools and
reception.
Oh, okay. Could you explain a little bit more about the importance of early years and why we now are more aware of its importance?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think about 90% of a child's brain is developed by the age of 5. So those... Yes, absolutely. So it's not completely, but and there is obviously, we know that there's room for them to grow constantly, but it's really important in those early years that we get those core skills. The EYFS framework really states about prime areas. That includes communication and language. Yeah. That includes personal, social and emotional development and physical development. And we know that those are the bedrock of future learning. They're very much time dependent in the fact that those skills need to be taught really early on. Things like, as we know very often when people think about starting school, it's things like writing and phonics and maths. But actually as an early years and the early years system, we really want to make sure that those prime areas have the really good dedication, because we know that those 3 areas will be able to support the children in any form of learning as they go along. And they're kind of universal to everything. In order to be able to join in with understanding the world or being creative, you need to be able to communicate, you need to be able to use your physical development of your gross and your fine motor skills. skills. Personal and social just kind of seeps through everything we do, being able to get along with other people, being able to join in, being able to give your opinions and understand that sometimes you might not always be first.
A tricky one for our little ones.
Well, of course. And it still is, even when they go further up the score.
Yeah.
I think that's what we have to remember is we're all on that kind of journey of these are the foundations. Our early years are the foundations for learning for the rest of that child's life. So we have a really important and really privileged position to help children develop those really good early skills in physical development. And like I say, being able to speak, being able to listen. And I think the personal and social that comes up most regularly in my line of work with my early identification is emotional regulation, being able to teach children how to manage their feelings effectively, both at home, when they're out in public, and when they're in either nurseries or schools.
You mentioned the word transition. So from nursery and preschool to reception, how do you help bridge that? Because I feel like that's quite a big transition for most children, because you've gone from a free-for-all with maybe a little bit of learning, but not too much, to sort of going into the beginning of standardized education. So how do you support?
I would say hopefully it's not too much of a big leap.
Okay.
I would say that actually I would like to say that it's not that much. Providing reception classes are doing it really well, it shouldn't be that much of a big leap.
Okay.
There should still be plenty of opportunities for play-based learning. But certainly some of the things that I know, some of our settings, and when I say settings, it includes schools and nurseries in that one. But some of our settings, they have very good links. And as I'm going out at the moment in my advisory role, it is very much me checking on the transitions that are happening. Are the nurseries and preschools talking to the schools and vice versa? Very often they do play and stays where either parents or staff bring them over. If they might have phone conversations. There's lots of events. We have big transition events where settings get together and talk to the children. Yes, there is an element of more formalised with regards to some of our non-negotiables, such as things like phonics. But hopefully most reception classes are still very much play-based learning.
But in some ways, though, I feel like for my son, he went from 3 hours at nursery to
huge.
full-time. And that was, I think, the biggest transitional step. How would you advise parents in that kind of thing? Like for those little things that are big, how would they best deal with those?
So, yes, I suppose at that time, the times that some children do already spend an awful long time at nursery. So actually the length of the day is not really much of a challenge for them because they're used to. But for, those that haven't had as long being away from mum or dad is quite challenging, isn't it? Or from your carers. I think it is just the biggest thing I would take away is about compassion. Your child will have big feelings and big emotions. They may take it in. I mean, they're very confident and they're really looking forward to it. And maybe they've been at the school with siblings before. They may be incredibly ready for that transition from nursery or preschool to a big school, as it is. But it's just being really aware that this is a big change for children. It will be longer days, most definitely. It will be bigger ratios. We know that in preschools and nurseries, there is a lower ratio. So there will be more adults around to be able to support. Whereas obviously in school, very often it's a teacher and an LSA or a TA. So there are larger numbers. But I think it is mostly about the compassion, understanding those big feelings are going to be there. And it's about validating those feelings, listening to your child, not dismissing all those worries. And I think also another really important thing is as a parent, and you probably felt when I did too, that entrusting someone else to have your child for the day is quite a big step for you as a parent. And I think it's about knowing your own emotions, but not letting your child see that. Okay. So if you are anxious or you are worried, we want to really ensure that it feels like it's a really positive experience. And I think most parents do it. They talk about big score and how exciting it is. That can sometimes bring anxiety for children because they don't really understand what big score is going to be. Yeah. But hopefully with transitions, lots of schools nowadays do picnics or stay and plays where parents and the child can go in and see their classroom or meet their teacher. And also they do good websites nowadays. So it could be having a look at websites to see some of the things that you might spot when you're in the school.
Okay, so just basically reassuring them and supporting them, and that helps you as well because if they're settled, you're settled in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are things we do need to remember, because things do regress when they start school. I mean, there are children that will take it in their stride, as I say. Yeah. So when I'm talking now, it's not that all children will find it challenging, because they may not. But there are some children that it will be a big change. Maybe it is they come from a nursery and they don't know anyone in their class. That very often happens. So that's huge. You've got to make friends again. It could be that separation from that parent. Again, they've got to trust new adults. They may have been in nursery since very young, and suddenly they've got new adults that they have to learn to trust again. There may be different teaching styles from what they're used to from their preschool or their nursery. It may be a bigger building. They may have a very small nursery building, and suddenly they're in this giant place that has all these corridors. So it's a huge shift in a child's world when they're transitioning from kind of a nursery or preschool into their school.
How would you say routine helps support the transition, or would you say routine has got two sides to it?
Yeah, I think it has got two sides. I think routines are really important. I think for predictability for children, so they know what's going to happen. My boys and I found a really good routine that kind of worked for us, and it has adapted. I think that's the important thing. It has adapted with their age. The things that I did when they were very young, they're obviously more self-sufficient. They can do some of those things themselves, but it has to be what works for your family. Every family's different, and it depends on the number of children you have, or the people, whether it's going to be mum, whether it's going to be nan, whether it's going to be a childminder that's taking them to school. But I do think routine are really important in the fact of helping a child know what's coming up, that predictability. So just having simple routines, it's got to be manageable. Whatever you do as a parent, it can be very easy to kind of go online and find all these fancy routines and things, but unless you can sustain that, it's not going to help. So coming up, ask your child, give some of the ownership over to them. Ask them, what should we do first? Should we brush your teeth, or should we have your clothes? I think also one of the things I think for routines is preparing the night before. It really is important to have the bag by the door, the shoes by the door, the reading book already in there, the water bottle. So all those things have been done so that there's no added stress in the morning. And I think also having clothes either laid out on the floor or hung up so that they're ready for the child to access. And I think I always remember of having, if I have got an available t-shirt or some polo shirt or shorts in the cupboard, in case on the day the shorts don't feel as comfortable as they did literally the day before. Just, I think preparation, it's really important, so that in the morning when it is busy, we know as parents, before I had children, it was lovely. It was a very calm start to my morning, and then I realised that it's not like that. And mornings are busy. Whatever you do and however much preparation you do, they are busy, and something will. But I think if you are prepared and you have things ready, then if something comes up, such as they suddenly remember it's swimming, or they need their trainers for the day, or those things can be kind of just put into the routine or kind of added in. Whereas if you're not organised the night before, I think sometimes otherwise those mornings can become stressful for yourself, and then that feeds onto your child.
They become frantic, don't they? The morning rush, it feels like, that symphony going off really, really fast, and you're like, I've got to remember everything, don't talk to me, I've got to remember everything.
Exactly that.
So preparation is key.
It really is. I think I try and prep as much as I can the night before, so we're completely ready. And I think also having things in the same place all the time, so the shoes are always, I mean they usually are right there in families, but the shoes are all ready by the door. So again, the child can do that independently. They don't need to be asking where their shoes are, and they probably still will. But the fact that everything is ready to go, I think is really key. And that's an awful lot of pressure on parents, because we have to remember so much and all the different events that come up. But I think that is one thing I felt as a parent was really important, was to make sure that we were organised and we had so simple routines. One of the things that we used to do when they came home from school was they would put their shoes away, they would have to get their reading books out for me and their water bottle, so that we could obviously have the reading books. We used to do it at night time, and then I'd have their water bottles ready. So that just became a routine for us, and it wasn't too taxing. It was just get those two things out and then mummy can sort them. So keeping it manageable.
In what would you consider basic, simple routine?
Well, so for the morning, I would say, obviously you've got key things like the clothes ready. So they'll have the clothes ready to be able to do that independently for themselves. And then it's obviously children brushing their teeth, either if they choose to do it before they go downstairs, and then it will be having your breakfast. Some parents choose to read in the morning. They'll actually read the child's school book. I didn't find that practical for me. I found our mornings too busy, but for some families that works really well. So it could be that kind of feeds in somewhere. I chose not to, and instead we'd come down. My boys would stay upstairs until kind of we all came down as a family, and then we'd come down and have breakfast. And then it might be a little bit of calm time. I'm quite happy for them to have. Some parents don't, but I'm quite happy for my children to have a little bit of iPad time. I know my children will come straight off their iPads when they're ready. Understandably, if that's not for your family and your child child may find that more of a struggle or a distraction, then it's a no. But then it is kind of giving them warnings before you're ready to go. So it's not suddenly, right out the door, we've got to go. It's very much, right, in about 5 minutes, we need to go and get our shoes on, but just trying to keep it calm. It won't always be that way because life has a habit of not making it always calm. But I think the more you can get ready and just have that simple routine that stays the same. So it's predictable every day. They know there's certain things. There are visuals now that you can purchase. Certainly when my boys were young, that wasn't the case. But certainly online, there's visuals now that children can have the pictures of the order to do things with little things they can post or close so that they can have the organisation and the routine for themselves to develop that independence.
Which is the key, isn't it? Because
Absolutely.
We want them to... I think reception is that time when they start growing that wonderful independence, and we have to kind of prep them for it, because there's the prep before they go to reception, the worry that they're ready for reception. Will they make friends? Will they cope with it? And then there's the year one worry as well, whereas they have to start trying to dress themselves or get into like a PE kit. So at our school, you have to change into your PE kit in year one. And
they don't do it in reception?
No, in reception we have tracksuits. So they're always ready for PE. Yeah. It's play all day. They're very strong on learning through play.
Absolutely.
So it's a whole new uniform in year one. We've got ties, shirts, buttons. which
you'll find in some schools they will have that in the reception class. So there'll be lots of settings where they will already have that in reception class. And I think the thing to remember is, obviously, we're trying to encourage independence.
Yes.
But teachers are human and they know that these are 4 and 5 year olds. So if a child is really struggling with their socks or with their buttons or their shoes, then, the ideal is that you don't want to be doing 30 when they're doing 30 lots of buttons or shoes. But it's also about thinking as a parent, like giving your child, if your child can't do laces, then don't give them lace shoes.
Yeah.
Give them Velcro shoes so that they can still have that level of independence. If your child is struggling with buttons, give them a polo shirt if that's an option at the school, so that you're still giving them that ability to be independent. But I know that it is a worry, but teachers are, and LSAs they're wonderful people. They will, of course, help your child if your child is struggling.
Yes.
But it will just be encouraging them. Like, you have a try first and then I'll be able to help you.
Yes. No, it is. It's a little worry that you, as a parent, you suddenly start overthinking.
Absolutely.
And your worries, which aren't your child's worries, suddenly become really big worries. So we're having to regulate our emotions as well. Like you mentioned earlier, not allowing your child to see will you be able to do the button, or will you come home, and embracing that.
I think we're very privileged as teachers. You're handing over your most prized possession to us to look after.
Yeah.
And most people in reception are incredibly kind, warm people because they're working with very young children. Yeah. So I think it's just to be aware that teachers will help your children and teachers will show compassion and be kind to your children. So if they are struggling, we will help them. That's part of our role. The other thing I would say is think about your preparation for when you leave the house. So when you're leaving home to go somewhere, are you going to scoot? Are you going to ride? Is there a car involved? It's thinking about those additional transitions. So it's not just as simple as leaving the house. Some children may find it really easy and be skipping along, ready to go to school. There are others that may find that more challenging. And one of the things I learnt through some of my understanding of the brain is that chewing is really good way to regulate. So if a child is struggling, and sometimes my son used to find the transition and walking to school quite challenging, and then obviously scooters and things helped because that little bit of activity before can sometimes help. Some children may find that too much. It's about knowing your child, but chewing. So it can, as my child got older, we ended up having mints. But when he was very young, we used to do chewy vitamins on the way to school. We used to have something to chew because when you're chewing, you're not in kind of fight or flight mode. You're just in you're eating, you're calm. It's your body senses that it's okay, you're calm.
Oh wow, so, I've learned something really new. I'm like, I didn't know this.
So food and drink is a huge regulator for children. Having a drink with a straw, some of the bottles now are fab because they have that kind of straw at the top. Yeah. But again, the gulping, it means that it's quite soothing for your central nervous system. So we did chewy mints as they got older, but chewy vitamins on the way to school. And like I say, some children, exercising is a great thing. If you need to use the car, because obviously maybe you live further away, if your child likes it, have that walk, have that predictability as well on the way, spotting landmarks. Do it every day. You've got that routine embedded then, that they go, oh, now we're up to the lamppost. Oh, now we've seen the pizza shop. Or so they can picture their route on their way to school. I think, again, is a really nice way to kind of make that transition in the morning.
When you're transitioning out of school, when you're coming out of school, how do you deal with that? Because you get those, sometimes some children very tired,
Yeah.
very grumpy,
Absolutely.
and just almost want to be left alone for a few minutes. How do we deal with that?
So there's two things that I will say. As a teacher, when I was very young and having now obviously learned so much more, if a child went out and kind of threw their bag at their parent, I would have marched over and said, you don't do that in school. Don't do that to your parent. Having now learnt more myself and obviously having my own children, I realised that lots of children do contain themselves at school because they're good children and they want to behave. They know the right things to do. So they are able to contain themselves at school. But when they see that safe person, and I deliver quite a lot of training on behaviour, training at the council for this, you're their safe person. You're the person that's going to love them unconditionally. You're the person that's going to help them no matter what. So very often when they see you, it could be that you're the person that does get the cross, the angry, the tired, the screaming, because you're that person that's going to hold them and look after them. So I think one of the things to remember when your child comes out of school is no phones. I think it's really important so that you're focused on them. And it's really tempting while you're waiting. And I do that myself. I do it. Then I have to remember when my child comes out to put my phone away so that I'm greeting them straight away. And I always have a food and drink ready for them when they first come out. So suddenly in this hot weather, I always have some sort of ice pole. It doesn't have to be big or sugary. Sometimes I have a little tiny bag of sweets. It can be carrots, it can be a bagel, something that's nice and crunchy. Again, crunchy is the key. Chewy is the key. That's really good for that kind of real good level for central nervous systems. But having that prepared, again, it's that preparation. Now, some children may like to, after school, go straight like to a park or somewhere and let off all that energy because they've contained themselves all day. Whereas other children, and certainly my own children, we needed to go straight home. Yeah. It was better for them to be able to come home and let out any of those emotions that they needed. And so at home, I had a little trampette, like an exercise one, in the hallway, and they would come home and they would jump. So trampolines are great, really good for supporting that kind of transition from school kind of thing. So yeah, biking, scootering for some children, going over to a park for some children and really letting out that energy. I would say, certainly when children first start reception, they will be exhausted. Even if they have done a whole day at nursery, it's a different type of learning and a different environment, and they're having to learn so many new things. So in my mind, it would be, don't necessarily rush off to a club. As tempting as it may be, you could find that the behaviour might be quite overwhelmed because they've gone from one area of containing and managing their feelings to going straight to another. So I think certainly with youngsters, it would be worth not investing in all the clubs. I certainly didn't until my children got older. I didn't go to many clubs until I knew that they could manage their feelings after school effectively enough to be able to then go on to clubs. So I think, again, food, having some food ready, and knowing your child, knowing do they need to come home and have that quiet time to be able to let out all those feelings. The other thing we were just talking about previously was not necessarily bombarding them with questions.
Oh, that's every parent's favourite bit, isn't it? How was your day? Who did you play with? How was it? Who's your teacher? What,
And they say, I don't know.
I don't remember. That's it. They're done. No more information.
Well, I think they've kind of had that really busy day anyway, and they're trying to, I think as an adult, when we've had a really busy day at work, if someone then quizzed you on all the things you've done, you'd be like, please, just give me a moment. So I don't tend to ask my children questions when they come out of school. I ask them how they are, and then I might say, did you have a good day? But then I leave it there. I don't, unless they share by themselves. Sometimes I've said a trick that I used to do was just used to tell them about my day for a little bit so that they either got bored and told me what they did, or just because it kind of had that conversation where there's no pressure on them to tell me all the things that they had done that day. So I would say, when they come out, just don't bombard them with things. And it is hard because sometimes we do have to rush off places. If you have swimming lessons and they're booked at that time, you do have to rush off. But I think being prepared with food and drink is really important. I think if they like some particular comfort, so a teddy or a blanket or something, they've been busy all day. They might need that. They may need to come home and just be on the sofa for a little while and relax. And then after that, they might want to go to the park or something. It's about knowing your child and also understanding that if they do feel overwhelmed when they come home, that is okay. That's normal. It's not that your child has I don't know, suddenly developed all these behavioural needs. That is perfectly normal. Lots of children do very well at working incredibly hard to follow the rules and boundaries at school. And then when they come home, they need to be able to release some of that.
I suppose we forget that. We forget that they're in this environment where they have to be good. They have to listen. They have to sit still. I mean, not so much in reception, but we have that. We have that
reception too.
Not as much though. It's sort of they're building them up, but as they go up through the school. So I suppose it is that intensity of being a certain person at school and then being more yourself at home, I guess.
Absolutely. Being with I mean, hopefully many children don't mask too much when they're at school. Yeah. And obviously if they do, then that's where you might want to pick that. And certainly I think if they're at school and they're very well behaved and they come home and there's really big extreme behaviours at home, then that's something that maybe later on you might want to investigate with the school or something. But it is normal for children to come home and feel quite exhausted, because not that they've been like badgered from one thing to another, but in school you do have to be part of a group. There are groups going on, and you do have to, if everybody's going outside, then or if everyone's moving to lunch or something, you have to follow that. And there are kind of routines, and schools are very good at adapting, and very certainly recently there's even more need for them to be really understanding unique child and part of the EYFS, and also building those positive relationships so that they can adapt to how the children's needs. But it is still a lot of a demand on a child throughout the day. And I think as adults, when we've had busy meetings or we've had a really intense day, the last thing we want when we come out is to be shipped somewhere else or have loads of people asking us questions. Yeah. We just need that kind of little bit of time to come in and relax for a little bit.
Because I suppose we're just trying to catch up, aren't we, as parents? We're like, fill us in. We want to document 500 words of everything. But it's too much. Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, compassion. I like that word. I think compassion for them, because they've had a long day. They've essentially been at work.
Yes, absolutely. So, they've been doing their work. Their play is their work. Their play is their learning.
What tips would you have for parents dealing with big emotions? Like how would you help your child regulate? You mentioned chewing earlier.
So yes, food is a huge regulator. I think it's something that we underestimate. And I think years ago, before I had children, I picked up my nephew once from school, and he had said, like, where's my drink? Where's my snack? And obviously and not being a parent myself, I was like, what? Why do you need those? I understood. He'd been busy all day at school, and obviously they have access to water and drink all the time, like water all the time. But it's having that little bit when you come out as an adult, when we need a bit of a pick-me-up, we might have a bag of crisps or a cup of tea or something, and it's the same for your children. So having food as a huge regulator for children. And some children, the more and more I go into settings, if children are struggling, one of the things I first say is, well, what's their transition into school? Like, have they had breakfast? Do they need to have a little snack when they first come in? Are they needing a drink when they first come in? Because that might help them regulate for the rest of the day. The other thing that is really important is explicitly talking about emotions, and very often just kind of lots of the settings, schools tend to have sometimes zones of regulation, which is where their children can choose the colours of how they're feeling. They all link. Lots of nurseries and preschools tend to have colour monsters, so the colour monster books, and the little green and yellow monsters, to be able to get children to start talking about their emotions. And I think it's really important, and I've been really advocating for recently, that it's our duty with these younger children that we start to help them understand their emotions, and that it's not negative to feel a certain way, but how you manage that feeling, or how you are able to have tools to be able to support you with that. And that's kind of my behaviour training at the moment, is all about understanding why children have their big behaviours. I do a lot of talking about Dan Siegel, and he does something called the HAM model for the brain, which talks about the upstairs brain, which is your thinking brain, and your downstairs brain, which is like your survival brain. And then in between you have your little amygdala, which is your warning system. And then when you're feeling worried or vulnerable or scared, that you flip your lid, which basically means your front brain, your thinking brain, no longer works as well. So I've been talking to settings an awful lot about that, to understand that when a child is feeling dysregulated, that there's no point putting demands on them. There's no point trying to talk to them about their behaviour, because actually they're not in the point where they can understand that. I think it's really important at home. Again, if your child comes home and there's some big emotions, it's very often to say, oh, we don't behave like this at school, or I don't understand why you're doing this. But actually what they need at that point is validation. So they need, I can see you've had a really tricky day. I think I learnt that really quick with my child. When he came out, if he did throw the bags on the floor in front of me, your instinct would be again to say, oh, don't throw your bags at me, pick them up. Or you don't normally do that. So it's just about, I can see you've had a really tricky day. Let's go home, and when you're ready, we can talk about it. So, and another powerful phrase that Dan Siegel very often talks about is using the I wonder. So I wonder if, so not telling the child how they're feeling, but wondering aloud. I wonder if you're feeling angry. I wonder if you're feeling frustrated. But teaching children those feelings. I wonder if you're feeling frustrated and it's not okay to hit mummy, or so you're making sure you're validating their feeling, and you're reminding them that that's still not okay. I prefer and rather than but, because but can have that negative connotation. So it becomes whatever was said before, but that's the last part we want you to hear. So again, it's I can see you've had a really tricky day. I can see that it's been really busy for you, and I don't want you to hurt mummy. Let's see if we can find something. So the other thing that I've been supporting settings with is looking at regulation tools. So I've designed like a little comfy box or a calm down box, and having things in there that would help your child if they are feeling quite dysregulated. Things like feathers, bubbles that are really good for the blowing, for the calming breath. Having things like spinners, mazes, like with water, all those kind of sensory toys. Poppets are good, but they only have, I call it a one-trick pony. They only do it for a little while. But there's so many other things out there nowadays. But that's something I've been advocating for lots of our settings to have, is sort of an area. So we call it co-regulation, right? We hear a lot about self-regulation. And as adults, that's obviously what we have to do. We have to self-regulate. But certainly with our younger members, it's more about co-regulation. And we do that instinctively as parents. We're always working with our children and helping them. But it is really understanding their emotion. And I think also with the biggest behaviours that we see is understanding that's your child's way of telling you they're very out of control at that point and they don't know what to do. And what they actually need is your calmness to feed off on them, and they really need your compassion at that point to understand that they're dysregulated. They need your help to be able to feel calmer. So I think, yes, having food prepared, possibly jumping if that's something your child really enjoys, climbing, hanging, really good as well if you're feeling dysregulated. Having tools such as calming resources. Some children, it might be spinning. They might like to spin if they kind of had a really busy day, but it's finding the thing that works for your child. It's kind of trial and error, and not having too many demands on them. I think when they come in, and if they are dysregulated, knowing that at that point they cannot hear you. Their brain is it's in survival mode. Yeah. They're trying so desperately to understand their central nervous system and keep themselves safe, that actually if they are misbehaving, it's embarrassing as a parent. It's not nice if your child comes out and they throw their bags at you or scream at you. And if that's a reoccurring thing, it might be you adjust how you pick up in that. So it might be that you make sure that when you take in the morning, if they have to queue up before they go in or something, you make sure you're the last person so they can just walk straight into the classroom. There's no hanging around. If that might be something that dysregulates the child because they have to queue and wait to go in. And it might be vice versa. And with picking up, it might be if your child finds all the crowds quite overwhelming, which can be the case, that you make sure that you're kind of one of the last parents to pick up so there's not so many people, so that if they are feeling dysregulated, one, it's not in front of so many people, and two, that you can calm them and lead them out like quietly. So I think there's some tips that I always recommend to parents, is know your child and know how and what supports them for getting you to and from school.
We have so many things to think about.
Absolutely.
When picking up. But it's really nice to hear how actually it's little things that can make the world of difference to how your child enters school and leaves school. And that's quite nice, because I think if they're able to go in calmly and you leave them calm, and if you pick them up a little bit calm, even if they're grumpy, but just a bit calmer, it really, I think it'll make the evening routine a little bit better and things like that, which is really lovely to know. With early years, going back to, you were talking about the core fundamental things that we need to look at and try and help a child develop. Could we talk a little bit more about those? Because I'm quite interested in, because I know communication is a tricky one, because children do develop in their own time.
Absolutely.
So what would you be hoping for as a basic level? Not necessarily, I know there are those kids who come out of the womb and they're chatting and then there's those kids who want to take their time. So just before entering reception, what kind of communication would you hope a child has as a basic, not necessarily
I think
must,
it is just being able to kind of hold a conversation as you and I are now. By the end of the early years, you're assessing, can you understand a child? Can they have the back and forth conversation? But I think, it's just that they're able to converse. And some children, it might be that they're not verbally conversing. It can be that they have their own choice boards, and that's fine. They have pictorial pictures to be able to communicate. Have to remember that not all children do communicate verbally. They may use pre-verbal tools and making noises, or like I say, using choice boards or pictorial representation. So it's just making sure that as an adult that you're just talking to your children as much as you can. I think it's really important that you talk to them, teach them new words. Once I read a while ago that if a child can say the word Tyrannosaurus Rex, then why do we worry about big words with our children? Teach our children big words. They'll soon pick it up and they'll remember it. And particularly with emotions, using those and modelling as an adult. I feel really frustrated at the moment. That space has just gone in the car park and mummy was going to go in there. I'm feeling quite frustrated by that. So I think modelling is a really good word. Modelling to be able to show your children how to use vocabulary in the right way. If a child child is, and they should be at that age, might say, I goed somewhere. It's just saying, oh, you went to, so you're modelling again. You're not criticising, you're not correcting them, you're just kind of modelling it for them. So I think as an adult, that was what I would recommend, is lots of modelling. I think really when they come into a reception class, it's just, you want to be able to hopefully have a conversation with them and just talk. And there may be some children that are incredibly shy, and until they warm up. I think that's really important for settings such as schools, and they do this so beautifully well, is they will have things sometimes like home visits, like I say, picnics, come and plays, because they want to get to know your children as quickly as possible, because they want to know what things they enjoy, what things they find tricky. And I think having those conversations as a parent, if you do get to have a home visit, or you do get to have a chance to talk to the teacher, it can be really nerve-wracking, wanting to tell them everything, like all the things that you're worried about, which is understandable as a parent, because you want to make sure they know. But I think it's, just having that open conversation. And if they are struggling in the morning, it is just a case of saying on the door, just had a bit of a tricky morning, they're here now, they're all okay, but we just had a tricky start to the day, just so that kind of the teacher can know, and hopefully adapt slightly, or just kind of check in with your child and say, okay, Poppet, do you want to drink? I think that's really important. I think as practitioners, one of the things I'm advocating, and I will go back to the physical and the communication, but I think one of the things I'm advocating in my behaviour training is for that validation for parents, that if your child has had a tricky start to the morning, or if they're finding it challenging after school, most teachers are incredibly compassionate, but it's that validation for parents as well. It's that I can see it's been a tricky morning, it's okay, I will either give you a call later on, and that's what I did as a teacher. If I knew that one of my children had a tricky day, I might make a phone call at lunchtime and just say, look, they've settled now, they're fine. That's not to say that all do, but I mean, that's something I think is really important, to make that parent feel heard if their child's had a tricky day. So validation not only for the child, but also validation for the adult, that it could have been a challenging start to the morning. So communication with the teacher, I think, is really key. That's really helpful in that transition, and making sure it's a smooth transition for your child. And then back to the communication. So the other one is the personal and social. So I mean, that underpins everything, isn't it? It's teaching your children. Sharing is one of those things that I think parents felt the children should have mastered, but they're still working that when they're in year 1 and year 2 and year 3. I mean, they're still working on it.
I feel like sharing is actually a lifelong lesson,
yes,
because
absolutely.
even sometimes in families, you find they don't share when they're grown up. So you're thinking, we're grown up, we're meant to be showing our children. You have to,
absolutely.
We have to share. But you find occasionally, the last Dorito does not get passed on.
And that's what I think. I always, when I do my behaviour training, I always take it back to, we have an awful lot of expectations on our young children. We really do expect so much of them. And as an adult, we have every right to say, if we don't like a particular food, we can say, actually, no, I don't want to eat that. Or if we are finding a particular space like really uncomfortable, we'll move. So we can do that as adults. But for children, it's a lot harder, because they have to kind of toe the line and conform in some ways. So I think it's really important to understand we are talking about young children. They're 4 years old. Yeah. Sharing is tricky for children, and especially if there's new toys, which there will be, new resources at school that are really exciting. And most reception classrooms will have things like timers in that they can then say, right, okay, in a minute, let's swap over. And so don't be surprised if they're not completely sharing. But it is, as adults, it's just modelling again, isn't it? Oh no, you need to wait your turn, darling. They were going up the stairs first. So just us as adults just kind of intervening and reminding to model to them. And then with regards to the personal and social is also, as we said, the independence of making sure that the clothes are there, that they've tried them on. I would say sometimes trying them on if you know that your child finds it really challenging in the morning to get ready. And they've tried them on and made sure that everything fits nicely. Like I say, even if they've worn it the day before. But just, okay, so these clothes fit nicely. Let's lay these clothes out for you. And then things like kind of the social side, just if there are opportunities to meet up with other children that might be in their class, that's a really nice way. I mean, children have this unique ability that when they go places, they do just make friends, don't they? Go to parks, go on holiday. They make lifelong friends that they don't see again, but for that one period, they become their best friend. They are usually quite adaptable. That's not to say that all children. Some children may find it more challenging. That might be something you just kind of approach with the teacher and say they do find that kind of side a little bit more challenging. And then the last one is the physical development. That's really important as well. And so that's, your gross motor skills, you're climbing, you're jumping, you're skipping, you're scooting, you're biking, all those really big muscles. And that, I think what people worry about when their children start school is, can they write their name? And there's so much more that goes on before they can write their name. In order to be able to write your name, you need to have all those gross motor skills, those shoulder skills, those elbow skills. All those skills need to have been developed in your arm strength to be able to hold a pencil. I think it's incredibly important, and that is summer holidays, out and about as much as you can. Like I say, climbing, jumping, hanging. Really good for regulation as well. Hanging from the arms, incredibly good for regulation. And then it is moving into those fine motor skills. So lots of schools will have things like nuts and bolts, tweezers, really looking at those kind of small, before we even kind of need a child to be putting a pencil in their hand. So I think value those skills as how important they are. If you teach your children those sort of skills and do them as much as possible when they go to school, then things like being able to hold a pencil will come more naturally because they've built up the strength in their arms and their hands, so they're ready to be able to do that.
Basically, spend the summer at the park, letting them climb on everything, on the beach, building sandcastles, and just get them playing, but building their strength through that play. Yeah. So they have fun without realising they're developing
absolutely
these skills that we
and
can
that's what
build.
I think early years is all about. Is we are building all those skills. Obviously, there are core things we have to teach because that's part of the EYFS and that's part of what the government like for children of that age. But there are an awful lot of skills that come before picking up a pencil or being able to read, such as things like for reading is playing memory games are incredibly good for children when they're reading. Being able to look at pictures and not do the reading, but talk about the pictures and talking what's in the pictures. Those are pre-reading skills. And I think it's looking at what our pre-reading skills look like, what our pre-writing skills and what our pre-mathematical skills look like. I think if parents knew more about those skills, it would help them realise that they're doing an awful lot of it already. There's lots of preparation that's going on already to help your child be ready for the next transition into school or nursery.
I suppose because we don't label it, it's just naturally done.
Yeah,
we're not aware of it. I remember a nursery teacher saying to me, "Oh, get your daughter on the monkey bars and that will help her writing." And I was like, I don't really understand why. She's like, "Oh no, it builds the strength." Yes. And once I knew what it was, I was like, "Oh, I understand. I see what you mean." It is just a case of sort of, like you said, preparing for what's to come, but doing it in that fun way.
And things like phonics as well. I know lots of parents worry about their children. Do they know sounds before? School will teach them their sounds. I think, again, the phonical skills, it's things like understanding rhymes and patterns, like clapping out patterns, really having a love of books and knowing familiar stories and being able to retell familiar stories. Those are the pre-reading skills and pre-phonic skills that we, again, need to be advocating to ensure that parents know that this will help them on their journey for when they get into school.
That's lovely. That's reassuring. I say it's lovely because I feel like it's really reassuring. It makes you feel like, actually, I don't need to worry about the writing and the reading and those part of things. There's all these things I can do before that. And then school will help start that journey of reading and writing, and then
you'll join the school with them. Yeah, you'll be joining with them, and then when they have meetings, they'll be telling you some of the ways that they teach reading and some of the ways they teach writing and maths. But it really is having those rich skills beforehand. And there's lots and lots of things that you only have to look online. There's lots of things that talk about what I would say. There are some stuff out there as well that kind of don't always help, because things like constant like tracing with pencils and things are not always the best use. There's so many more ways you can teach fine motor skill than always having chunky chalks outside, having paintbrushes with water and painting fences, things like that. That again is all building up strength in their arms and being able to hold tools ready for when it is writing time. But yes, I think it's maybe making parents more aware of those pre-reading and pre-writing skills and focusing on, as we said, that communication and language, that physical development and that personal and social and emotional development.
I think going back to what you mentioned earlier, that actually our awareness of our young children has changed. Absolutely. And talking to you, I'm aware that how I learned at school, and when I go and think, oh, I didn't do that at school, I realise actually they're not doing it because it's changed. We've learnt more. We understand our children more, and
Absolutely.
We're able to put that into practice. We understand their development so much better.
I think there's been pioneers that have always been trying to plug what good early years looks like. And certainly some of the people that I've learnt from along the way have taught me what good early years practice and good early years learning should look like. But I think we are, particularly with where we can access resources and things so readily nowadays, we are more aware. I think back to when I was younger, I did do, maybe my mum knew, who knows, but we did have long times playing in the garden, washing dolly clothes, pegging out my dolly clothes. I was practicing my fine motor without even realising. Having that time outside with my sister and having to share, learning to negotiate that sharing in the garden, going down the slide. So I was practicing all those pre-school skills without even realising that was the case. So I think, yes, I think we are more aware, certainly, about the brain and understanding children's emotions more and how important that is for teaching children and being really explicit with understanding their emotions. But I think it has always been there. I think it's just raising our awareness again that these things are really important. And things do change. Behaviour techniques change over time. I think when I was growing up, it was very behaviourist. You did something, there was a consequence for it. And that's not to say nowadays there aren't consequences for behaviour, but it's about understanding why a child did it rather than just punishing why a child did it. It's understanding why the behaviour happened in the first place so that you can then use it as a teaching tool for next time. And that maybe is the difference.
Thank you so much for your words of wisdom, Natalie. And with that, I think we are coming to an end. But thank you. It was really fun and I learned so much. But I feel like I have 1,000,001 questions, but I feel like they're for another time. But thank you so much. It was really great. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. And we truly appreciate you listening. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, subscribe, and follow to stay updated on future episodes. We look forward to seeing you next week.